What is up, YouTube? It is Docky or Docky Style Gaming, and I am back at it again with another GodFall video for you all today. Now, I'm pretty excited for this one because this is some info that I know a lot of us have been waiting for: in-game content and loot progression. We'll be going into the weapons, we'll be going into the trinkets, lifestones, battle banners, augment constellations, and 5 different in-game modes in GodFall. And thanks to a recent interview with the technical producer of GodFall on GameByte's website, we got all this information, and I am going to be breaking this all down for us because I know this is content that a lot of us have been waiting for. So I was going to start with loot and progression, but I know really we all want to know about them in-game modes. The thing that's going to keep us coming back to GodFall and essentially is the key to the success of a looter shooter, the in-game content. The reason people and players are going to want to come back to your game every single day. So let's hop straight into all this info that we got, breaking down these different game modes. Now, before we get into everything in this article, I do want to go over to an older article from GameSpot where the CEO of Counterplay Games, Keith Lee, had stated that GodFall will have more than 90 kinds of enemies so that our build combinations will essentially help us hopefully deal with them skillfully, and that story mode will have both mid and in-game bosses that you'll fight against throughout GodFall's campaign. Now, one of the other game modes he brought up was the hunt missions in that article. He said that these missions will send you out to track down, learn about, and eventually face off against bosses. He also said expect a whole lot of them and expect the bosses from the hunt missions to be different from the ones that you'll see in the story mode, which in my opinion is pretty awesome to hear. Not only are we going to have unique bosses specifically tailored for the story mode, but the hunt mode as well will have its own set of bosses also. Now, moving back over to the GameByte interview, the biggest chunk of information in terms of in-game came from the Tower of Trials. Now, I've mentioned the Towers of Trials many videos ago, but now we actually have a big chunk of information and essentially what all the Towers of Trials actually is. Now, the technical producer went on to say that Towers of Trials is a roguelike in-game challenge mode accessed within the monolith. It can be played solo or co-op, and as players complete combat trials, they progress up the elevator in the center of the monolith. And then went on to say that as players complete combat trials, they progress up the elevator where the enemies will get stronger. Now, they did say luckily players can earn boons and item rewards on their way up. Now, I'm assuming boons might have something to do with each of the rooms. It might be different buffs and stats for your character, but I'll get into that when we start breaking down all the different encounters. And then item rewards, of course, are the different types of loot that you can get from the Towers of Trials. So luckily he broke down Towers of Trials in its entirety. So the first thing you're going to want to do is access the Towers of Trial in the monolith, and you will encounter the elevator encounter trial. Now, you'll be defeating waves of enemies, and doing so will reward you with the key, which is a specific type of currency dedicated to the Towers of Trials, and they said that these keys will reset to 0 when you leave the Towers of Trials. Now, after you fight all these enemies and get your key from the elevator encounter, you'll move assumingly up to the next floor where you'll have your room encounter trials. Now, you can choose what rewards you want by going through the room's doorways. Each doorway will have a reward type icon above it, so you can pretty much choose which reward you want just by looking at the room's doorway. Now, they did say that there are several types of reward types that can be earned, but only once you walk through that doorway and defeat the room encounter trial. Now, he also did go on to say that room encounter trials will offer different gameplay, and potentially meaning, and though this isn't in the actual article, but assuming what they mean by different gameplay, since you're killing enemies, there might be different objectives for you to do on that room's trial. Potentially you get soul shatter kills or take no damage on that room trial and things like that. Now, they did say that there's no time limit and that it's in a larger area than the elevator room encounter. And then essentially defeating all the enemies in that room will spawn the reward type that was noted on the doorway. Now, something to also take note of when doing these trials, as I mentioned, you will earn keys every time you do the elevator trial. And the technical producer said that sometimes chests that require certain amounts of keys will spawn in the room encounter trial. And if you don't have enough keys for that chest, they did say that the player can go back to the elevator encounter once you're done with the room encounter, of course, and then take the elevator up, which will also increase the difficulty, but also give you more keys. And essentially it's a rinse and repeat cycle at this point. So that is Towers of Trials as a whole for the most part. Now potentially there might be some extra stuff that they left out or some secrets for us to find in the game, but that's just about everything there is to cover in Towers of Trial. You have the elevator room that you fight essentially a horde of enemies. You get a key once you complete it. Once the elevator stops, you have different doorways that have different loot tied to it. Once you go in those rooms, you complete that room trial, you get your reward, and I guess you can either leave at that point, or if you want to go up, you can, and it'll increase your difficulty, and you'll get more keys, and you can also earn more rewards as you keep going up in the elevator or the Tower of Trials. So I think that's a pretty dope game mode. In my opinion, it's much better than your traditional horde mode, which I had originally thought it might be. It actually adds a bit more of a unique element to that type of a horde mode environment, so I actually dig that, and it'll be a bit more fun, letting you pick what type of loot that you want or specific gear types that you want from the reward doorways, essentially. Now moving on to the next activity that you'll be able to do in the game, they brought up side missions. Now this was actually brought up in a previous article, which I'll have a whole other video on as well, but it was by the same people, so I wanted to cover it in here as well. But Dick went on to talk about side missions, saying that they are going to be combat based. He said that the Archons express themselves through combat, and side missions will have various activities that pop up. He also did say that there are no fetch quests in Godfall, so don't expect any fetch quests in our side missions in this game. I'm actually pretty happy to hear that. I know some people probably don't mind fetch quests, but honestly those are generally the most boring type of quest, where you're just walking around retrieving an object for somebody else, pointlessly has you going from point A to point B for no reason. So personally, I'm kind of happy there are none in here, and they're trying to focus most of their side missions or even just gameplay on melee combat. Now these last two game modes we have no real information on. One because it was teased, and the second one was because it was brought up briefly and just kind of glossed over. So at the very end of this article, Dick mentioned we are looking forward to sharing more in-game modes like Dreamstones in the near future. Now again, we don't know what Dreamstones is going to be, we just know that it's going to be another in-game activity, bringing our total now to 4 different in-game activities. And then the last one actually came from a Gamescom interview a few months ago, and I think a lot of people just kind of glossed over it, and in the interview it was also kind of glossed over as well. But when Keith Lee was discussing how to farm for Valorplate resources, he mentioned that one of the activities you'd be able to get resources from were custom game modes. Now again, what are custom game modes? We have no idea what that could potentially mean in Godfall, but we do know that that is a 5th type of in-game activity potentially in the game. So we have our hunt missions, our Towers of Trials, our side missions, Dreamstones, which we don't have any information on, and custom game modes that was actually glossed over so far to look forward to in Godfall. Now if what the technical producer said is true, there's potentially even more in-game modes to experience in the game, and they'll be sharing it with us whenever they're ready to, essentially. So hopefully that satisfied a few people's in-game itch for right now. But now that we got that out of the way, let's hop over to loot progression. Now when talking about loot progression, the technical producer broke it up into loot vectors, essentially is what he called it. He referred to as Valorplates being the canvas, and loot vectors are layers of paint that you apply to build a complete portrait. And then he broke it up into 5 different layers. Layer 1 were your weapons. Now when talking about weapons, he went on to say that there are 120 unique weapons across 5 classes, and every weapon is named and has lore attached to it. He then said that every weapon has a primary trait that is unique to that weapon, and a secondary trait that can be re-rolled in a pool of stats. And when it comes to equipping weapons, you can only equip 2 at a time. Now the second vector layer he got into was the trinkets. He says there's 3 types of trinkets, and I actually mentioned this in our character menu breakdown, but the ones he went into were amulets, rings, and charms. And even when I'm saying that, all I'm thinking about is Infinity Blade. But he did say that every trinket has a unique primary trait, and that you can equip 2 rings, 1 amulet, and 1 charm. And I did show that off in my character breakdown in one of my previous videos. Now the third layer he went into were the Lifestones. Now I actually just went into this in my last video, and I'm glad to know that I was right about it. Now Lifestones are essentially kind of like your consumable slots. He said that similar to other loot, Lifestones will have a primary and secondary trait, but what makes it unique is that it serves as your heal consumable, but apparently there are other interesting triggers to Lifestones as well. Now when it comes to Lifestones, you can only equip one at a time. Now as I mentioned in that previous video as well, we saw that inventory capacity wise, he was able to hold 3 of them on him. Now again, you might be able to hold more if it's dependent on a level, but as of right now, it seems like you can only equip 1 Lifestone, and capacity wise, it's 3 of them. Now when going into the 4th layer, he referred to the battle banners. Now I've showed off the battle banners in a couple of videos as well, but he went on to say that they are charged based loot items similar to the Lifestones that when placed down, they can provide a buff to you and your teammates or a debuff to enemies. They also refer to them as the most powerful co-op tool a player has, and that it packs a powerful punch in solo as well. Now, I'm very curious to see what all of the different battle banners can do. Like I said, we've only seen one of them in action, and it was a pretty impressive ability that it had, so I'm very curious to see what the other ones can do. And now the final layer is the Augment Constellation. Now, I've broke up the Augment Constellation in quite a few videos, but for the sake of this one, I'll still cover it here. Now, Dick said that each Valorplate has a unique Augment Constellation. Augment Constellations are made up of 10 nodes, and nodes will either be red, blue, green, or white. You must match the nodes with the matching color augments. Red is for your might, blue is for your spirit, and green is for your vitality augments. And anything can be plugged into the white slots. Now this next part is the interesting part because this is where we kind of get into Warframe territory and is some of the new information that we haven't had yet. Now he said that augments will have power drain values associated with them and your Valor plates will have a power capacity. Now think mod slots in Warframe and your Warframe's capacity as well. That's definitely what this is starting to sound like. It's actually a pretty good way to balance characters in games in my opinion, so I'm actually all for this. Now they also went on to say, again similar to Warframe, that the more powerful augments you have, the higher the power drain will be, forcing players to carefully decide how you build up your Valor plate power. And then also said that as you level up your Valor plates, your power capacity will increase as well. Again, similar to Warframe. And though I try not to compare games, you can definitely see where Godfall got a lot of their influences from, whether it be fighting mechanics or loot progression, or in this case, building up your characters. And luckily, it seems like they're taking all the best aspects from a lot of games and putting it all into one. But that is pretty much all of the information we got in this article. Like I said, there is another article that originally was going to come out today, but this one was just too good to pass up on. I know people have been waiting for in-game content and loot information, so I wanted to put this one out first, but trust me, I got a whole nother Godfall video planned for tomorrow as well. So let me know what you guys thought about this loot progression, what you thought about the different in-game modes, and what other potential in-game modes you'd like to see in the game from what we already have so far or know about so far. Links to all my social media accounts are in the video description, and the links to these articles are going to be in the video description, both the one I just talked about today and the one that I'll be covering in tomorrow. I'll leave links to both of them as well, just in case you want to read up on them both. So thanks for watching again, and like always, be sure to leave a like if you liked the video. If you didn't, don't. I'm out of here. Thanks for the love, thanks for the subs, peace.